"Read the last page," the single dad whispered, his weathered hands trembling as he slid the document across the conference table. The CEO's laughter echoed through the room, sharp and dismissive, until her own lawyer went pale. Tom Reeves' alarm clock rang at 5:30 on a Tuesday morning, the same time it had rung for the past 8 years. The small one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn filled with the gentle beeping, and he silenced it quickly, not wanting to wake Emma just yet. His daughter needed every minute of sleep she could get. The night had been rough, her asthma acting up again as the seasons changed. Tom rubbed his eyes and pushed himself out of bed, his feet finding the worn slippers beside his bed. The apartment was modest but meticulously organized. Emma's medications lined up on the kitchen counter, her backpack ready by the door, and a stack of library books on advanced mathematics that his 8-year-old devoured like other kids consumed comic books. On the refrigerator, a calendar marked with doctor's appointments, work shifts, and the circled date of Emma's upcoming science fair. Tom started the coffee machine and pulled out ingredients for breakfast. Emma needed protein in the mornings, the doctor had said. As the eggs sizzled in the pan, he glanced at the stack of legal textbooks hidden beneath yesterday's mail. Old habits die hard. 20 blocks away, in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, Caroline Mills was already on her third conference call of the day. At 40, she had achieved what most only dreamed of, CEO of Westfield Technologies, one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country. Her assistant knocked timidly, sliding in with another cup of black coffee. Caroline nodded without breaking her sentence about quarterly projections. The wall of windows behind her desk showcased the Manhattan skyline, but she rarely took time to appreciate the view anymore. On her desk sat a single photograph, face down, the only personal item in the otherwise immaculate office. She had stopped looking at it 2 years ago, after the divorce, but couldn't bring herself to remove it entirely. The Apex Systems deal was all that mattered now, a $2 billion licensing agreement that would cement Westfield's position at the top. Her phone buzzed with another message from the legal team. The contract was almost ready. Remember, Emma Bear, inhaler in the front pocket, spare in the side pocket, and Mrs. Rodriguez has the emergency one at school, Tom said as he adjusted his daughter's scarf. Emma nodded solemnly, her auburn curls bouncing around her heart-shaped face. She looked more like her mother every day, the same intelligent eyes, the same determined chin. "I know, Dad. I've got it," she said with the patient tone of a child used to explaining things to adults. "And you've got your big book today?" Tom smiled, zipping up his weathered backpack that contained a dog-eared copy of Advanced Contract Law he'd checked out from the public library. "Just some light reading for my breaks," he said, kissing her forehead. They walked hand in hand to her school, just 3 blocks from their apartment, before Tom caught the subway to Manhattan for his shift at Westfield Technologies. The security guard uniform wasn't what he had envisioned wearing when he was top of his class at Columbia Law, but life had taken an unexpected turn when Sarah died. The medical bills had drained their savings, and with a premature baby who needed constant care, Tom had made the choice. Stability and health insurance over career ambitions. 8 years later, he still didn't regret it. Caroline's heels clicked authoritatively across the marble lobby of Westfield Tower. Employees scattered like startled birds as she approached, averting their eyes or suddenly finding urgent matters to attend to on their phones. All except the security guard at the main desk, who met her eyes and offered a genuine good morning, "Miss Mills." She barely registered him, another face in the blur of her day. Her mind was already in the 10th floor conference room, where the legal team would be waiting with the final draft of the Apex contract. As the elevator doors closed, she caught a glimpse of the guard pulling out a thick book. Probably some thriller novel to pass the time, she thought dismissively. 2 weeks until the signing ceremony, and then maybe, just maybe, she could take a weekend off. The thought almost made her laugh. The elevator doors opened, and Carolyn stepped into the chaotic energy of the executive floor. Her assistant, Michael, appeared at her side, tablet in hand, rattling off the day's schedule. "The legal team is waiting in conference room A. The quarterly report needs your signature by noon, and the board wants to move tomorrow's call to 4 instead of 2, he said, struggling to keep pace with her. Caroline nodded, barely listening. She'd been functioning on autopilot for so long now, she sometimes wondered if she could hold an actual conversation anymore. "And the Apex final draft?" she asked, reaching the conference room doors. "Ready for review. They've accepted all our terms." Caroline allowed herself a small smile. This was what mattered, the win, the achievement, the validation that came from business success. She pushed open the doors to find 12 lawyers waiting, documents spread across the massive table. "Let's make history, people," she said, taking her place at the head of the table. During his lunch break, Tom sat in the small security office, reading intently. Contract law had always fascinated him, the precision of language, the power of well-placed clauses. He'd been following the news about the Apex deal. Everyone at Westfield had. Something about the reported terms didn't sit right with him, but he couldn't put his finger on why. He turned another page, making notes in a small notebook. Suddenly, the door opened, and his supervisor, Frank, poked his head in. "Reeves, need you to cover the executive floor." Jenkins called in sick. Tom nodded, carefully marking his place in the book before tucking it into his locker. As he rode the elevator up, he straightened his uniform and badge. The executive floor was usually off-limits to his rotation, a stroke of luck that might let him glimpse the famous contract everyone was talking about. The day passed in a blur of meetings for Caroline. By 6 in the evening, most of the staff had left, but lights still burned in the executive offices. Caroline stood at her window, finally taking a moment to look at the city below, lights beginning to twinkle in the growing darkness. The contract sat on her desk, all 73 pages of it, ready for tomorrow's final review before being sent to Apex. Her phone rang, the board chairman, wanting one more assurance that everything was perfect. "Trust me, Richard," she said confidently. "I've gone over every line myself. This deal is bulletproof." After hanging up, she gathered her things to leave, the contract securely in her briefcase. In the hallway, she nearly collided with a janitor, no, a security guard, who quickly stepped aside. "Sorry, ma'am," he murmured, eyes down. Caroline barely nodded, continuing toward the elevator. Behind her, Tom Reeves glanced at the briefcase, a small frown crossing his face. Wednesday morning brought unexpected chaos to Westfield Tower. Tom arrived for his shift to find the lobby buzzing with tension. Frank pulled him aside immediately. "All security personnel on high alert today," he said grimly. "Apex Systems filed a lawsuit against us last night, claiming patent infringement." Tom felt his stomach drop. "The deal?" he asked. Frank nodded. "Dead in the water. Everyone's in crisis mode." Throughout the morning, Tom watched executives rush through the lobby, faces tight with stress. During a quiet moment, he overheard two lawyers talking near the security desk. "They're claiming our entire platform infringes on their core technology," one said quietly. "If this sticks, we're looking at hundreds of millions in damages." The other shook his head. How did legal miss this? The contract was supposed to protect against exactly this scenario. Tom couldn't help himself. He raised his head. "Excuse me, sir," he said respectfully. "Was there an integration clause in the final draft?" The lawyers looked at him in surprise, then amusement. "Thanks for your concern, buddy," the taller one said condescendingly. "I think we've got this covered." They walked away, chuckling. Tom's face burned, but he'd caught something in their conversation, a mention of a last-minute appendix added to the contract. He made a mental note to check the public filings if possible. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Emma's school. His heart raced as he answered. "Mr. Reeves? Emma's having an asthma attack. We've administered her emergency inhaler, but you need to come right away." Tom was already moving toward the door, calling Frank as he went. "Family emergency," he said tersely. "I need to go now." The pediatric emergency room was crowded, but they'd taken Emma back immediately. Now stabilized, she sat propped up in the hospital bed, oxygen levels slowly improving. Tom held her small hand, relief washing over him in waves. "You scared me, kiddo," he said softly. Emma managed a weak smile. "Sorry, Dad. The gym class was running outside today." Tom nodded, making another mental note to speak with the school about Emma's exercise limitations. A nurse had brought him coffee and a sandwich, knowing from previous visits that he wouldn't leave his daughter's side to get food. He'd called work to explain he wouldn't be back today, then pulled out his book and notebook. If he was going to be sitting here for hours, he might as well use the time. Caroline Mills strode through the hospital corridors, irritation radiating from her like heat. Her mother had chosen today of all days to fall and break her wrist. With the Apex crisis exploding at work, the last thing she needed was this detour. She found her mother's room and spent 30 minutes arranging for a private nurse and better accommodations. On her way back to the elevator, she took a wrong turn and found herself in the pediatric ward. As she reoriented herself, she glanced through an open door and stopped. The security guard from Westfield sat beside a small bed, a child sleeping peacefully while he read intently. What caught Caroline's eye wasn't the domestic scene, it was the book in his hands and the pages of notes spread beside him. She recognized the legal text, the same one her top attorneys used. Before she could process this oddity, her phone buzzed insistently. Another crisis at the office. She continued to the elevator, the image already fading from her mind. Back at Westfield the next morning, Caroline barked orders to her assembled legal team. "I don't care how impossible it seems, find me a way out of this lawsuit," she demanded, pacing the conference room. "Our stock is down 30%, the board is in panic mode, and Apex is smelling blood." The head counsel, Richard Barnes, looked exhausted. "We've been through the contract 20 times, he said. "The integration clause should have protected us, but they're claiming the appendix creates a loophole." Caroline slammed her hand on the table. "Then close the damn loophole." As the meeting dissolved into technical arguments, Caroline noticed a piece of paper that had been slipped under the door. Absently, she picked it up, a page of handwritten notes analyzing the very appendix they were discussing. The handwriting was neat but hurried, the analysis detailed and precise. At the bottom, a simple note. "Check section 73, paragraph 4, last sentence. Integration applies retroactively to all communications." There was no signature. Caroline frowned, reading the analysis again. "Richard," she interrupted. "Have you looked specifically at section 73, paragraph 4? Tom watched the executive floor from his post near the elevator. He'd taken a risk leaving those notes, probably nothing would come of it. But he couldn't stand by watching the company implode when he might have spotted something the high-priced attorneys had missed. Emma was back at school today, with strict instructions to take it easy. The medical bills from yesterday would be another stretch for his budget, but that was a problem for later. Right now, he was wondering if Miss Mills had found his notes, and if they would make any difference. His radio crackled. "Reeves to executive reception, please." Tom's heart skipped. Had someone figured out he'd left the notes? Would this cost him his job? With a deep breath, he headed toward reception, mentally calculating how long his savings would last if he was fired today. Michael, Caroline's assistant, was waiting at the reception desk. "Miss Mills wants to see you," he said, eyeing Tom curiously. "Now." Tom followed him through the labyrinth of executive offices, conscious of stares from employees they passed. Michael stopped at Caroline's door, knocked once, and ushered Tom inside before disappearing. Caroline Mills stood at her window, back to the door. Without turning, she spoke. "You left these notes under the conference room door." It wasn't a question. Tom straightened his shoulders. "Yes, ma'am." She turned then, studying him with piercing blue eyes. "You're a security guard." Again, not a question. Tom nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Tom Reeves." She held up his notes. "And you just happen to understand complex contract law and integration clauses?" There was no point in hiding now. "I was in law school at Columbia. Top of my class, actually. Before life took a different turn." Caroline's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "Sit down, Mr. Reeves," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. She placed his notes between them. "Explain this analysis to me." In detail. For the next 20 minutes, Tom walked her through his thinking. How the Appendix Apex had requested at the last minute seemed designed to create ambiguity around prior communications. But how the standard integration clause in Section 73 actually contained unusually comprehensive language that, if properly leveraged, would invalidate their entire claim. As he spoke, Caroline's skepticism gradually gave way to focused attention. She asked sharp, precise questions that Tom answered without hesitation. Finally, she leaned back. "Why are you working security instead of practicing law, Mr. Reeves?" The question caught him off guard. He hesitated, then answered truthfully. "My wife died during childbirth 8 years ago. Our daughter, Emma, was born premature, with chronic health issues. I needed stable hours and good health insurance more than I needed a prestigious career." Before Caroline could respond, her phone buzzed. "The Apex legal team is here early," Michael's voice announced. Caroline stood. "Bring them to conference room A. And find Richard immediately." She looked at Tom, decision made. "Come with me, Mr. Reeves." Tom followed her, confusion and a touch of hope mingling in his chest. In the hallway, they nearly collided with a small figure. Emma, clutching her backpack, eyes wide with excitement. "Dad," she exclaimed. "Mrs. Rodriguez had to leave early, so she brought me here," and the lady at the desk called upstairs and she stopped, noticing Caroline. Tom knelt down. "Emma, what's wrong? Are you feeling sick again?" Emma shook her head. "No, I'm okay. School ended early for teacher meetings. I'm sorry, I should have waited downstairs." Caroline watched this exchange with unexpected interest. "Your daughter?" she asked. Tom nodded, standing. "Emma, this is Miss Mills. She's the CEO of the company." Emma's eyes widened. The boss of everything? Cool. Against all professional judgment, Caroline found herself smiling at the child's response. Mr. Reeves, we have an important meeting. Do you need to? Tom was already shaking his head. Emma knows the drill, don't you, kiddo? Find a quiet corner, homework first, then books? Emma nodded solemnly. Caroline made a sudden decision. Michael, she called to her assistant, who materialized instantly. Please set Miss Reeves up in my office. She can use the couch and the coffee table for her homework. Both Tom and Emma looked at her in surprise. Michael, to his credit, didn't bat an eye. Of course. This way, Miss Reeves. As Emma followed Michael, she looked back at her father with a thumbs up. Tom turned to Caroline. Thank you. That was unexpectedly kind. Caroline was already moving toward the conference room, her mind back on the crisis. Don't thank me yet, Mr. Reeves. If your analysis is wrong, we're both going to look very foolish in about 10 minutes. The Apex legal team sat on one side of the long conference table, expressions smug and confident. Westfield's attorneys sat opposite, tension evident in their rigid postures. Caroline took her place at the head of the table, motioning for Tom to sit beside her, a move that drew confused glances from her team. Gentlemen, she began coolly. I understand you believe our contract has a fatal flaw. The head Apex attorney, a silver-haired man named Davidson, smiled thinly. Not a belief, Miss Mills. A fact. Your team overlooked the implications of Appendix C, which clearly preserves our rights to the underlying technology. Caroline noticed Richard Barnes starting to object, but she silenced him with a glance. Instead, she turned to Tom. Mr. Reeves, what's your assessment of Appendix C? The room went silent. Davidson looked at Tom's security uniform in confusion. Tom cleared his throat, then spoke with quiet confidence. Appendix C appears problematic in isolation, he began. But when read in conjunction with Section 73, Paragraph 4, its effect is nullified. He reached for the contract in front of Caroline, turning to the last page. The integration clause here is unusually comprehensive. It states that this agreement supersedes all prior and contemporaneous agreements and understandings, whether written or oral, related to the subject matter. The key phrase is in the final sentence. For avoidance of doubt, this integration applies retroactively to all communications, including those referenced in any appendix hereto. Tom looked directly at Davidson. Your appendix attempts to preserve prior communications about technology ownership, but the integration clause explicitly negates that very attempt. The room remained silent as Davidson frantically flipped to the reference section. His face, previously confident, gradually drained of color. He whispered urgently to his colleagues, while Richard Barnes and the Westfield team exchanged bewildered glances. Caroline maintained her composure, but beneath the table, her hands were tightly clasped. Finally, Davidson looked up, his confidence visibly shaken. We'll need to consult with our client, he said stiffly. Caroline nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. Of course. While you do that, we'll be preparing our countersuit for bad faith negotiations and attempted contract manipulation. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to withdraw your complaint entirely. The meeting adjourned with the Apex team in disarray. As they filed out, Richard approached Caroline. Where did you find this? He asked quietly, indicating the crucial clause. Caroline glanced at Tom, who stood respectfully to the side. Sometimes, she said carefully, we overlook the contributions of those we don't expect to contribute. Richard followed her gaze to Tom, understanding dawning on his face. The security guard? He asked incredulously. Caroline nodded. The Columbia-educated security guard with an apparent genius for contract law. When they returned to Caroline's office, they found Emma curled up on the couch, fast asleep, an advanced mathematics textbook open beside her. Tom immediately went to her, checking her breathing with the practiced eye of a parent, used to medical concerns. She's fine, he said softly. Just tired. The attacks take a lot out of her. Caroline watched this tender moment, something stirring in her chest that she hadn't felt in years. Mr. Reeves, she said quietly. Tom, I believe I owe you more than a thank you. You potentially saved this company millions of dollars today. Tom straightened, carefully moving Emma's book to the side. I'm just glad I could help, he said simply. Caroline studied him for a moment. I'd like to offer you a position in our legal department, she said decisively. Your analysis today demonstrated skills we clearly need. Tom's expression was complicated, surprise, gratitude, and then reluctance. That's incredibly generous, he began carefully. But I have to consider Emma's needs. My security position gives me predictable hours, the ability to leave for emergencies without question, and most importantly, the health insurance she depends on. Caroline hadn't expected this response. In her world, career advancement was never declined. The benefits package would be significantly better, she offered, and we could discuss flexible arrangements. Tom was already shaking his head. It's not just about benefits, he explained. It's about being there when she needs me. Law firms, even corporate legal departments, expect long hours, total commitment. Emma doesn't have anyone else. As if hearing her name, the little girl stirred on the couch, blinking awake. Dad? Did you help the boss lady? She asked sleepily. Tom smiled. I tried my best, sweetheart. 1 week later, Westfield Tower buzzed with the news. Apex Systems had not only withdrawn their lawsuit but had returned to the negotiating table on terms heavily favorable to Westfield. The stock price had recovered, and then some. Caroline stood at her window, watching the city below, feeling oddly unsatisfied. The win should have been enough, it always had been before. Yet her thoughts kept returning to Tom Reeves and his daughter. She'd done some discreet research. His wife, Sarah, had been a promising mathematician. Her death during childbirth had been sudden and unexpected. Tom had been months away from graduating law school, already with job offers from top firms. Instead, he'd walked away from all of it to raise his daughter. Such sacrifice was foreign to Caroline's experience. Her own marriage had ended because neither she nor her ex-husband had been willing to compromise their ambitions. The intercom buzzed. Mr. Reeves is here to see you, Michael announced. Tom entered her office, still in his security uniform but standing straighter than before. The respect he now commanded in the building was apparent. Miss Mills, he greeted her. You wanted to see me? Caroline gestured to a chair. I've been thinking about our conversation, she said directly. About your concerns regarding a legal position. Tom nodded, waiting. What if, she continued, we created something different? A consulting role, part-time, with flexible hours and full benefits. She pushed a folder across the desk. I had HR draft this. 20 hours a week, work-from-home options, and a salary that should help with those medical bills. Tom opened the folder, scanning the document with the careful eye of someone used to reading fine print. This is extremely generous, he said finally. But I don't understand why. One good catch doesn't warrant this kind of offer. Caroline walked to her window, gathering her thoughts. When was the last time you saw me acknowledge a staff member below executive level, Mr. Reeves? She asked. Tom considered. I don't believe I ever have, he admitted. She turned to face him. 8 years as CEO, and I've created a culture where a brilliant legal mind was relegated to checking badges at the door because no one bothered to look beyond the uniform. She sat on the edge of her desk. Your situation has made me reconsider certain priorities. Tom studied her, seeing beyond the power suit and intimidating demeanor to something more complex. This isn't charity, he said, not a question. Caroline shook her head. Westfield needs your mind. But perhaps we can structure that need around your life, not the other way around. Dad! Dad! Emma burst into the apartment, waving a paper excitedly. I got accepted. The science program at Bridgewater Academy. Tom caught her in a hug, spinning her around the small kitchen. That's amazing, Em. I'm so proud of you. He set her down, taking the acceptance letter with shaking hands. Bridgewater Academy, one of the best schools in the city for gifted children, with a specialized program for students with medical needs. They'd applied months ago, never expecting to get in, much less receive the substantial scholarship mentioned in the letter. Emma was already planning. They have a real laboratory, Dad. And a nurse on staff all the time. Tom read through the details again, a strange suspicion forming. The scholarship was anonymous, but the timing, just 3 weeks after he'd accepted Caroline's consulting offer, seemed too coincidental. When he arrived at Westfield the next day, now in business casual rather than a uniform, he went straight to Caroline's office. She was on a call but waved him in. The Tokyo numbers look good, she was saying. Let's proceed with the expansion. After hanging up, she raised an eyebrow at his expression. Problem with the Anders brief, she asked. Tom placed the Bridgewater acceptance letter on her desk. Did you do this? He asked directly. Caroline glanced at the letter, her expression carefully neutral. Bridgewater has an excellent science program, she remarked. And their medical facilities are top-notch. Tom waited, and finally, she sighed. I may have mentioned Emma's situation to a board member who happens to be a major donor to their scholarship fund. The decision was entirely merit-based. Tom wasn't sure whether to be grateful or offended. We don't need charity, he said quietly. Caroline's eyes flashed. It's not charity when it's earned, she replied sharply. Your daughter is brilliant, her test scores prove it. And you've saved this company far more than the cost of any scholarship. 3 months passed. Spring arrived in New York, bringing warm breezes and new beginnings. Tom's consulting role had expanded naturally, as his legal acumen proved invaluable across multiple departments. He still worked limited hours, still prioritized Emma's schedule, but found himself increasingly involved in Westfield's strategic decisions. Caroline, meanwhile, had begun making subtle changes to company culture, implementing flexible work policies, enhanced family leave, even an on-site childcare center in planning stages. The board had been skeptical until she demonstrated the positive impact on recruitment and retention. Today, she stood in a small neighborhood park in Brooklyn, feeling oddly out of place in her casual weekend clothes. She checked her watch. She was early for their meeting. Across the playground, she spotted them, Tom throwing a baseball with Emma, both laughing as the little girl's throw went wild. Caroline approached slowly, not wanting to intrude on the moment. Emma saw her first. Miss Mills, she called, waving enthusiastically. Did you come to see my pitching? Tom turned, surprise evident on his face. Caroline? I thought we were meeting at 2. Caroline smiled, the expression coming more naturally these days. I finished my calls early and thought, well, it's a beautiful day to be outside instead of in some coffee shop. Emma tugged at her hand. Want to play catch with us? Dad says I'm getting better. Before Caroline could respond, the ball was pressed into her hands. She looked at it dubiously. It had been decades since she'd thrown anything. Tom caught her expression and grinned. Don't worry. We're not keeping score. Awkwardly, Caroline tossed the ball to Emma, who caught it with a triumphant cheer. Something tight in Caroline's chest loosened, just a fraction. Later, they sat on a park bench while Emma played with other children nearby. The Miller acquisition looks promising, Tom commented. Their scheduled work discussion finally beginning. Caroline nodded, but her attention was still on Emma, now organizing some complex game with rules she appeared to be inventing on the spot. She's remarkable, Caroline said softly. So much like her mother, according to you, but I see a lot of you in her too. Tom followed her gaze, pride evident in his expression. The best parts of both of us, I hope. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. I've been thinking, Caroline said finally, about that work-life balance concept everyone keeps talking about. Tom raised an eyebrow, waiting. I'm not very good at it, she admitted. Never have been. But lately I've been wondering what I've been missing. Tom studied her thoughtfully. You know, he said carefully. Emma has been asking when you might come over for dinner again. She's quite determined to show you her science fair project. Caroline felt an unexpected warmth at the invitation. The first dinner had been ostensibly work-related. Reviewing contracts over takeout at Tom's apartment when Emma had been too sick for him to leave. But it had evolved into something else. Emma explaining her project with passionate detail, Caroline finding herself genuinely fascinated. The three of them talking long after the contracts were forgotten. I'd like that, she said honestly. Though I should warn you, I'm bringing dessert this time. No one should have to endure my cooking twice. Tom laughed, the sound rich and genuine. It's a date, he said, then immediately looked flustered. I mean, not a date, just a calendar arrangement. Caroline surprised herself by reaching over and briefly touching his hand. I knew what you meant, she said softly. In the playground, Emma waved at them, her smile bright in the spring sunshine. Tom waved back, then turned to Caroline. You know, when Sarah died, I thought that was it for me. That I'd spend the rest of my life just being Emma's dad, which would have been enough, more than enough. I never expected. He trailed off, looking embarrassed. Carolyn finished for him. To find yourself working for a demanding CEO who invites herself to your family dinners? Tom smiled. Something like that. Caroline looked out at the children playing, at the families enjoying the weekend sunshine, at this parallel world that had existed alongside her driven, isolated life. I never expected any of this either, she admitted. But I'm finding that unexpected things can be good. As they gathered their things to leave, Emma ran up, slightly breathless. Can Miss Mills come for ice cream too, Dad? She asked hopefully. Tom looked at Caroline questioningly. She checked her phone, 3 missed calls, 7 emails, all supposedly urgent. For the first time in her career, Caroline Mills made a deliberate choice to let them wait. I'd love ice cream, she said, slipping her phone into her pocket. Emma grabbed her hand, tugging her forward, chattering about flavors and toppings. Tom fell into step beside them, his expression one of quiet contentment. As they walked through the park, Caroline felt something shifting inside her, perspectives realigning, priorities reordering themselves. Tomorrow would bring new challenges at Westfield, new contracts to negotiate, new decisions to make. But today, in this moment, she was exactly where she needed to be. Following an excited 8-year-old toward ice cream, walking beside a man who had chosen love over ambition, and somehow found both. Perhaps, Caroline thought, there were more important contracts in life than those signed in boardrooms. And perhaps it wasn't too late to learn how to read them properly.